We're really honored to have an incredible keynote speaker in Sean Downey. Sean's a vice president of platforms for the Americas. He's a 20-year veteran of display advertising, starting his career back in the 90s when the cookie was first invented. He spent spent 4.5 years at DoubleClick prior to the Google acquisition, where he led agency and advertiser business. And in his current role at Google, he partners with advertisers to drive adoption and usage of technology to achieve their business objectives. He's passionate about driving digital transformation for his clients, and he's known for his commitment to developing his people and building an inclusive culture. And then joining Sean from InfoTrust, an equally inspirational person, our Chief Growth Officer, Michael Lobin, who's been really on the forefront of helping our partners develop their durable strategies as well. So Michael, I'll kick it over to you and let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Pat. Thank you everyone for joining. Sean, welcome.
Thanks, Michael. Really excited to be here. Pat, I too wish to be in person next time. I think we're getting close, so keep our fingers crossed and maybe we'll be able to do this face-to-face next time. But thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. So Sean, we have a full day planned ahead. As Pat mentioned, a lot of topics are going to be discussed today. But before we dive into tools and solutions and first-party data, I wanted to ask you just a couple of questions about marketers' mindset and strategy. Certainly, there are a lot of changes that are happening in the marketing ecosystem. We are talking about regulatory changes. We are talking about technology changes. We are talking about changes in consumer interest and demands and their focus in privacy. Certainly, there is quite a bit that is happening and changing right now. How can everyone stay optimistic and opportunistic when the environment is changing so much?
Well, I'm a disruptor by nature. That's what I do. That's what I've made my career on, and I think that's what makes companies great. So I actually look at this as a really exciting moment in time for all of us, because together we can actually build a durable and future-oriented ecosystem that we all need to operate in and define what the next 25 years of digital advertising will look like. So I'm always trying to get advertisers and marketers and publishers and agencies to think about what's the benefit that we can gain from adopting new technology and new principles and tactics that will last and actually bring brand value. That said, I get it. Like, I know it's a tough landscape. It's shifting at a pace that's never before been seen. And this is a market that's changed a lot in 25 years, but it's moving as fast as it ever has. And it has a lot of people on edge. And the one thing I hear most from customers is that they're overwhelmed by it. And it's important to just recognize and be empathetic that there's good reason to be. A future without cookies is disruptive for how everyone's operation is set up. But it's a necessary and long overdue change. We have to embrace that. And that's what helps us stay optimistic, because the most important thing that we have in every business is our consumers and the trust that they put in our brands. So how we treat them and how we make sure their experience is amazing and delivers value is the most important thing that any marketer could do. So you have to think about, how do I make that consumer experience valuable, long-lasting, and productive, that's going to last? And it's really clear that we need to shift to do it. So if we start thinking about the future and how we bring value to the marketplace and value to our brands and value, most importantly, to people, that helps us get our head around the change that has to occur. And the last thing that's really important there is we're not alone. Like, this is happening to everyone. Like, so it's not happening to Google, or it's not happening to InfoTrust, or it's not happening to L'Oreal. It's happening to everyone. Everyone's faced with the same challenges. Nothing is proven to be what's going to work in the future. All the tactics are being, made up in real time to make sure that they're durable, and all the value is yet to be discovered. So leaning into that is a really huge opportunity for companies to get it right and be on the cutting edge of innovation as they go forward.
Absolutely. I love that. And a lot of times when I meet these partners and our clients, I mention the same thing, right? It happens to everyone, right? So you are not alone in this. Together, we'll figure it out. But when we are looking at the technologies that are going to last, right? You've mentioned what's going to generate value in the future. What are some of the key trends that you are paying attention to? What do you see possibly as fads, or maybe some things that are not likely to stay, versus things that we really should put our money on, if you will?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that as we answer that question, it's important to think about the other mindset that's really important for decision makers and executives in the marketplace today. And that's the mindset of being a truth seeker. Uh, Here at Google, we're truth seekers. I'm a truth seeker. I'm looking for what's happening around me that gives the answers to how you should be investing your time, your strategy, your energy. And that means you have to seek out hard truths, not just truths that are convenient to you, but the things that you might not like to know, that tell you, a pretty rosy picture sometimes and a pretty tough picture other times. And I think there are three truths that you really need to think about to answer the question that you've asked. The first one is, as a company, as a brand, is the consumer at the center of your strategy? Because they should be. Because if you don't respect your consumer, you risk your relationship with them. And let's remember what a consumer is. The consumer is your grandmother, your neighbor, yourself. They're people, right? People care a lot about privacy. Go look up the stats. There's plenty of them out there. Pew Research has said 4 out of 5 don't trust how their data is used. Axios has a similar strategy. It says they don't trust who's being shared with. Right? So it's clear that you have to tackle things that provide people-oriented trust. Right? So you have to make sure you're thinking long-term, that you're respecting that opportunity, because anything that's not respecting consumer transparency, control, and choice, and good user experience won't last. Right? So it's really important that you don't replicate things that already happen and say that they don't like. That's a really important thing. The other thing is you have to start thinking of long-term, right? So many of us are short-term thinkers because we say something's breaking, let me go do the next thing. And I like to say the path of least resistance is most often the path without wisdom. Like, we're not changing a technology policy in the marketplace. We're reshaping how an ecosystem works. So the hard truth that a marketer needs to see is that this marketplace has operated on a cookie economy since 1995. And it wasn't even intentional. It was co-opted. It's changing. It has to be reinvented. And if you don't progress, you'll replicate the past and you'll be replacing something else 2 to 3 years down the line. So that's a really important truth to know. And then you have to make sure you think about, are you in a culture where it's okay to fail or okay to learn? Right? Because the truth is you have to get comfortable with rapid innovation at this time. And there's a lot of technology that's innovative. There's a lot of policies that are innovative. There's a lot of new tracking methodologies and measurement methodologies that are innovative. That means experimentation, innovation, and failure. Right? You have to be comfortable with that. And the hard truth is if you're not comfortable with that, or you're afraid of failure and you can't innovate because of that, you'll get caught flat-footed a year from now. So every marketer needs to understand those truths. And then the answers are kind of there for you already, right? So we've made decisions based on that. Once third-party cookies are phased out, others are offering a level of user tracking through ID-based scenarios. We're not. That could be like PII graphs based on people's email addresses. It's really simple for us. We don't think they'll meet the rising people-based expectations for privacy or meet the fast rising regulatory environments that exist around the globe. And we don't think they're sustainable. We don't think they're sustainable because they replicate cross-site tracking, right? And cookie deprecation is not about cross-site tracking. They're not about cookies. It's about cross-site tracking, right? So how are you changing the way that actually works for us? So that didn't feel like a good, sustainable investment that could help us focus on more important strategic things in the future, like the rise of e-commerce that became very digital oriented this year. It grew 10 points in the United States. Or the rise of connected television, all the networks are moving their TV online. Right? Those are really important things to build against versus just doing privacy fixes every 6 months. So we've chosen a long-term path. Like, we think privacy preserving APIs represent something of a futuristic that's going to help us track advertisers in large cohorts, aggregate them, but still deliver results. We think the advent of machine learning and modeling is really important because you can find tremendous insights that human eyes can't see. And we think there's still a massive place for first-party data activities because you can't repeat or replace something that matters for your consumers, but you do that with consent, with user experience and journey. And anything else that's out there that's hacking it together or replicating cross-site tracking or not having proper consent models, I think is going to be challenged.
And something that you've mentioned, the rise of e-commerce, I think when we start thinking this is like a marketing apocalypse that's coming, I think it's important to remember, right, e-commerce is on the rise. It's never been higher than before. It means that consumers are spending money. Consumers are going to our websites. Consumers are going to apps, digital properties, and they're buying products. Hence, there is a massive opportunity for us to present our best case for those dollars.
Yeah, if you're a retailer and you're in e-commerce, the United States economy went from 15% digital to 25%. And there's lots of headroom. It's 32% in China. And we saw how reliant we became on it as people in a pandemic. So it's really important. So that there you have choices, right? So our choice was develop week to week, quarter to quarter. And if you've been following all the trends as I have, you look at what Apple's doing, with iOS, with intelligent tracking. You look at Chrome browsers, you look at other browsers. We spent a ton of resources just fixing things that were broken. And we'd much rather build for space. If we build for space that's durable, privacy sensitive, we can really lean into making e-commerce work better for marketers and publishers. And we can lean into other things that we think have actual step change for performance versus just trying to make things interoperable because they were last year.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned about being a truth seeker, which I really liked, and I just want to make sure that I personally and maybe attendees have captured the three key pillars. People first strategy, think long term, and really cultivate the culture where it is okay to fail.
You got it. Those are I feel the most important ones.
Excellent. Now let's talk about the last one, okay to fail, because it feels like a lot of organizations speak about it, but there is still an opportunity to do better in terms of execution. So how do companies, organizations cultivate that culture of experimentation and testing, especially when we know that some of the solutions that are emerging maybe are not yet ready or might go away, but we still need to play with them and get comfortable with trying them out?
Yeah, it's a critical problem that faces companies, and most often people are open to experimentation and change when it's staring them in the face and they don't have any other time, or they have to evolve, or they risk failure immediately. It's really hard to create that culture with a long window. So you start thinking about that has to come from the top. Like the company, the CMO, the CEO has to be really, really comfortable with rapid innovation as a cultural thing. They have to be comfortable that experimentation derives future benefit. And then they have to be comfortable that not every idea is good, right? So they're going to see failure in that model. And they just have to accept that as they start to experiment. And large scale testing is not a technical thing, right? It's a cultural thing, right? So you have to start thinking about those. And it's possible to do because, we're sitting here in a virtual conference, right? Which weren't really working that well last year. They work really well right now. Lots of businesses were faced with changing and evolving or facing significant damage to their bottom line, right? So that onset of the pandemic forced leaders and their organizations to experiment with, I would say, unprecedented intensity, right? Whether that was reconfiguring existing work environments, as most of us did, reapplying a storefront business to a digital business, going into new markets, developing new skills for their capacity, and developing new product lines. And they all did it because they had to come together and they had to trial things, right? So the trick for many of our customers is, how do you do that all the time? Right? Why does it take a global health pandemic to get us all to get along and get onto experimentation, right? But it's really possible to do. And we can learn a lot from these things. So if you've done it once, you then realize the transformative power that exists with a sustained commitment. And then it's just about experimentation in small increments. One experiment leads to thousands, and that small changes leads to big changes over time. And it's a really good thing to embrace. The principles I use in my organization is we fail forward on everything. There's no such thing as failure in my team. There's only fabulous failure. What didn't work? Tell me what you learned and tell me what you're going to do next. And as we started going into this marketplace around cookieless future, we have an entire learning agenda that I asked my marketing science team to produce. And their goal was to fail 5 of the 10 experiments in the first quarter because they see the value in actually learning something on their hypothesis with real knowledge to adapt it, right? So it becomes, what are you gaining from experimentation and from failure? It's really important that we embrace this at this time because, we're doing something we've never done with customers. We're accused of dropping blog posts and telling you that we changed something yesterday and please adapt, right? We do that to customers all the time and they hate it and they should. This time we've put the blinker on for 20 blocks. This is what's happening. This is our rough plan to get there. Here's how you should start thinking about experimentation. Here's how you should start thinking about durability. Here's some tests you can start to experiment with. Take advantage. Because the companies that do that and they structure onto at really small investment levels, gain a 12-month head start on the marketplace. And that is going to result in bigger profits or bigger sustainability of your current output, which is super critical. You should be thinking about, how do I protect my business results and grow them 12 months from now? And you do that by doing small things now, right? And being not afraid to fail, not afraid to gain, but getting better month after month.
I like that you mentioned small tests, because I think if the organization gets more and more comfortable with putting together small tests and small experimentation, that reinforces the culture of experimentation. A lot of times we see companies as we are experimenting and they put together one big test. It does not go as well as they planned. Okay, and the culture of experimentation goes out the window. But if you do it consistently, it becomes really a habit of experimentation, then your culture continues to evolve as well.
Right. And that goes back to, that's tied to long-term thinking, right? So if you fall victim to, I call it short-termism, you will never make gains because you can't fail. You have to deliver the same results as you did last week. You can't try something new because any deviation is bad, right? So you have to have a long-term view to do exactly what you just said.
So maybe we can drive the message home even a little bit more. What qualities do you think successful digital leaders share, and who do you think is getting it right? Or what are the attributes of getting it right?
Yeah, there's a lot of great companies that embrace a lot of the mindsets that we've been talking about. And it's really hard to point to like one silver bullet that any of them actually do. But what they really do is they do a lot of things really well all the time. They do it repeatedly. And we're seeing companies like L'Oreal, who you have speaking, Nespresso, Sephora, and many others do the right things. And they're very intentional about their strategies. That's a really important word to think about as well, is what's the intention of what you're doing and why, right? These companies are obtaining and they're maintaining the commitment to data analytics across all levels of their organization. Knowledge is power. As data becomes harder to parse together and you get more gaps in it, what's your historical view on it? How can you actually model prediction against that? What does a good customer look like? Those are all really important things that are living and breathing that you have to invest in. It's not just about collection and ingestion, it's about doing something with it. They practice experimentation and modeling all the time. They have lots of little experiments running all the time, and they're constantly putting new solutions to the test to see if they can benefit the business. If you don't have an A/B culture, you don't have a testing culture. And all those companies have A/B testing cultures, and they're looking for incremental benefit over the last thing that they did because they're never satisfied. They've got really strong data governance across their data and their tools, which I know you guys are going to talk about because it is an asset.
Absolutely.
It needs to be valued. They measure their investment in analytics and how it impacts the bottom line. Like the smartest companies don't think about identity. They think about the value of identity. What is that is the value I place in identity to learn about incremental benefit to my company? So there's value in every analytics project. And more importantly, they focus on what I like to call the last mile. Right? So they embed their analytics into the core of every marketing function and every marketing decision, because the benefit of experimentation and cultural change around analytics is you learn something and you apply it as fast as you can, right? And that means those teams have to be integrated in some form or fashion. Either they sit next to each other, they report to the same person, or they have checkboxes where they have to talk to each other. There's different ways of doing that. And that's being done at scale. One really good example, you guys do this really well at InfoTrust, is one of the largest B2B retailers in the United States works with you at InfoTrust and is already experimenting in multiple ways. They're taking server-side tag management services, they're working with data clean rooms, and they're completing a GA4 deployment that is a more durable view of app and web environments for analytics. And they really started by basic things. What's the risk assessment of my current state? And then I knew what parts of my business are impacted. You able to work with them to show them the beginning how they start to begin to experiment with new solutions that are going to address their biggest needs and that are likely to impact their bottom line the most. And that's a really good process to go through now, because everyone wants to jump into like testing of new solutions. They want to jump into sandboxes, right? I want people to peel themselves back and start from the beginning and assess everything that they're doing with a good partner that can help them assess it. Think about what's sustainable and durable and what's not. What information they need to know that they don't know today in the future, what experiments they need to set up, and then what changes to their infrastructure do they need to do to be ready for the future. And now in the beginning of this transition, it's about remodeling your kitchen, right? Not moving into your new house, right? And because that will happen later. Like we'll remodel the kitchen now, run good experiments, and then we'll have a completed, view of the world in 12 plus months. And, partners, you guys are doing an amazing job, I think, of doing that with your customers. And that's just one really good example.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And again, just to summarize a couple of key points that you mentioned, because there's so much good information. You mentioned, let's start with the right intent, right? Have this culture of practicing and experimentation, then focusing on value and what is the incremental benefit for our business, and that last mile, right? So we don't just build the dashboards or reports that kind of sit out there, but how do I give every person within my organization analytics that they can embed into their day-to-day activities?
Right. Exactly right. Exactly right. And then you evolve for your own cultural needs. You'll figure those out. But those are the bedrocks of all the great companies.
Fantastic. So let's switch gears for a little bit. I know we have about 10, 15 more minutes. And we covered quite a bit about strategy, but I'm sure the question that is on the minds of many people is around the technology and the tools. The summit is about adapting to changes and building analytics practice that will stand the test of time, hence Durability Summit. So what does the modern digital analytics stack look like to you? And how does cloud fit into that stack?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fast evolving pace, right? So I think there's components that matter. There's your baseline infrastructure that you have to have. And I think it's really important that you start with a foundation that is first party oriented, right? So as we're starting to leverage the future, you have to be first party durable. So, we look at things like a site-wide tag management system, like we have one Google tag, for example. It's a really strong structure. We think GA4, Google Analytics 4, is a really solid foundation because it allows you to do first-party measurement across multiple dynamics on your website to understand audiences and behavior and trends, et cetera. And I think getting into connecting that data to your enterprise is really important. And that's where kind of cloud starts to go in because you can start to leverage big processing around things like BigQuery. You can start to play with modeling activities that start to take that data and crunch it a little bit differently. So at a core, those foundations exist. And then you have to really have a good modeling and insights topping. And that's either you're using scale technology to do it. You could use data visualization tools. You could use machine learning APIs, et cetera. You need a partner or a marketing science group that's actually getting benefit from those areas. So they're making sure that they can actually get insights and model. And then there's a connectivity to activation, or the last mile, as we just called it. So all those things connected to your buying tools, right? So your search bidding engines or your display bidding engines that multiple people have. And can you output that for insights to go back to the enterprise for other things like what's happening on our site for content or pricing strategies or customer value? Those all have to start to play together, right? So if I was going to sum it, you have a big data collection and ingestion function, you have a strong insights and modeling function, and you have a way to pass that intelligence for quick activation in the enterprise or externally in an advertising campaign. And that's a really good way to think about it. I think the things that you play with, like there's going to be, assets or inputs that matter, that stay the test of time, are threefold. One is your first party data is never more important. Right? And by first party data, I mean direct, one-to-one consented relationship. Like we're in the middle of a pandemic. I am probably Lululemon's greatest customer. I love athleisure. Like I got an athleisure shirt on right now because they're super comfortable. And I want Lululemon to know what I like because I want the best things. I don't need anyone else to know that I'm not buying their stuff from, right? So there's value in me giving information to Lululemon. There's less value in me giving it to, a big box retailer in that scenario, right? From that level, it's really important that you start to have that. So cultivating that, understanding your customers, developing a user experience that matters and leaning into it with them, super critical, and it's going to have a huge role for us. And, all the metrics tell you anyways, that works way better now than third-party cookies, right? And all the smart marketers already know that. So keep leaning into that because that world still exists. And you can cultivate those insights with the foundation that I gave you. Then you want to make sure you can leverage automation, machine learning, cloud solutions, because that combination that we just talked about builds your insights, helps you measure future performance in ways that are much more granular than campaign performance, and then lets you adopt it at scale. Like there's a huge power in learning something unique and then making sure that funnels through your entire advertising campaign to produce better campaigns. Automated targeting, smart bidding, conversion modeling to make sure you're doing the right things. There's a tremendous way to scale performance. And the one thing I want customers to think about is value is not derived from the identity. Value is derived from what you do with it to produce better results, right? So the power of your modeling, your insights, and your automation and your tools that help you create scale drives better performance than just identity by itself. Right? Identity is an input. Right? So it's really important that you start thinking about those. And then, of course, we'll play with the efficacy and effectiveness of privacy version APIs like Sandbox. Those are experiments, they're tests. Early tests are pretty good about showing that they show strong affinity. Many of our marketers have used cohort marketing forever. It works pretty well. And I think cohorts work really well. But you can expand on them. And that's where you're going back to automation and insights because you're trying to learn what works and what lookalikes mean and how you grow your business versus just talking to the same people. So that kind of gives you like a soup to nuts view from the bottom of things that I think are going to stay, they're going to scale. You need to create experimentation plans against those, and you need to make sure you can operate with.
You've mentioned the first-party data, certainly an absolute pillar when it comes to a durable strategy. But it would be short-sighted of me, probably while I have you, not to dig a little bit deeper into first-party data. And a thing that comes to mind is a lot of times when I'm online and I visit, let's say, an e-commerce website that I've not been to, I get immediate messages, get $5 off, get $10 off, get 20% off, just provide us with an email address. And it feels like they probably understand the importance of having first-party data, but I'm not sure if all of them have the strategy of how much first-party data is actually worth to them and what they will do with activating that. So how do we avoid the mistake of overspending on data acquisition without a clear understanding about what to do next?
No, it's a really good question because everyone is on a race. I think you described it really well, to collect first-party data. Yeah. Because it's the asset that, that's durable, right? And that's easy for some. Like if you're Amazon, it's easy to collect first-party data. It's an easy value exchange. You give me your email address and your credit card, I ship you a box in 2 days, right? And there's value. And then I show you other stuff that you might want to buy and I can ship you another box. Really simple value proposition that scales. A consumer packaged good company, not so clear. Like what's the value proposition, right? But everyone's trying to get as many names as possible from that regard, and that's a watch out for us. And I think people are working through this framework. I think the thing I would try and anchor on as a marketer it's going back to something that I kind of threw out there in the middle of a different answer is, what is the value of that first party data that you're gaining, or the value of that identity? Because it's going to be different for every brand, right? So a really good example is you could be like a Lululemon. Like there's a really good athleisure company out there I won't name. That's not them. That's doing a really good job with this. They, you know, they're in a boom time because the pandemic, people want this stuff. They've done the email offers that you suggested. They've collected, discounts for people, but they don't just treat it like remarketing, because I think what you're getting at, Michael, is the curse is that we just hit people over the head for what they did last time, right? Exactly. And we do more of that, or we give them a coupon to buy more of what they did last time. And that's really not the value that you have of first-party data. The actual value is if I could place a monetary value on what that customer is worth to me, and I have really tailored specific objectives with what I want to drive with them, I can measure the incremental benefit to my business of a logged in first-party data customer. Think lifetime value, think broader shopping cart experience, think understanding frequency of communications that you've referenced, versus just broad-based prospecting, right? And you can start to be really clear about how often do they need to hear from me, what types of things really matter, and does it provide incremental return versus just using something more broad, like a cohort thing. And that's a really tough experiment to run, but it's a really valuable experiment to run. And this company runs tens of experiments a day against that, because they don't want to over flood it. Like nobody wants that to become email marketing, which is, we all have like email inboxes that are crazy, right? So that's a really important thing. I think the other thing is it's not just a marketing vehicle, right? So sometimes your first party data is used to tailor the content or the experience on your website, right? That is the doorway, that is your storefront to the world, right? You spend all this money driving people that theoretically fit the profile of what you want to your website. That is the golden jewel of first party data. Could tailor that experience to be really useful, because that's why people want to give you stuff, right? Because they want it to be useful to them, valuable to them, and on point, and they actually expect it from you to give it to them. So companies need to be very thoughtful about how that fits into content from that area. So if you've got that lens, you'll be more clear about what you're getting, why you're getting, what do you think it's worth to you, and you'll treat it a little bit more preciously, because you'll understand how to extract the proper value from it versus just beating it up like a remarketing list. Because there's lots of ways to prospect, and there's lots of ways to drive mass traffic to your website that don't require personalization or someone giving you data and feeling like it's overused.
And I really like that idea of value and long-term thinking, right, about your customers, about your audience, not just how do I extract another sale from them, but really how do I build that partnership with my end consumer. Last question for you, Sean. We have the next few hours that we'll spend with the summit attendees. What would you ask of our audience today? What would you like for them to learn or do at the end of the session?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think I'll go back to what you asked me at the beginning, Michael. Many people, and rightfully so, are really nervous about the future. And they're really nervous because they haven't seen, because we haven't had to do it, that they can drive performance differently. Or that if you take away something, they're not going to perform as well, and that's going to hurt their company, it's going to hurt their OKRs, et cetera. So I want to enforce one really critical message that I tell customers and my team all the time. And if you take nothing else away from today, I hope that you write this thing down. If you didn't take any notes, it's a powerful, short sentence. Performance is not at odds with privacy. You can have your cake and eat it too. They go hand in hand. So I'm going to say it again. Actually, you can all close your eyes. You can feel a little meditative. You can chant it to yourself. Performance is not at odds with privacy. Performance is not at odds with privacy, right? It's important to know that, because performance is not predicated solely on one-to-one precision targeting. We've talked about advances in aggregation in this. We've talked about anonymization, on-device processing, all these other technologies drive performance today for you. You just don't notice because we're all worried about the data, right? So it's important that we embrace that. We embrace where technology is going. We embrace people in their right for privacy, but we also know we can drive tremendous performance for our customers and for our businesses, right? And we all have a role to play in that, right? We don't know all the answers yet as a group. It's a big coalition for us, but it's really important because privacy is not a technology differentiator or an aspiration held by a few of us. It kind of just should be, right? So as a marketplace, we have to make sure it just is, and we still find ways to drive performance. And if we work together to do that, we'll drive and we'll embrace a really bold future. And I'm a huge fan. I'm a disruptor at heart, and I think it's always the right time to be bold and brave. And I want people to remember, lean in right now because they're not at odds with each other.
Exactly. Well, you said that performance, I will repeat it, performance is not at odds with privacy, and it's important to start and begin experimentation, or as you mentioned, possibly beginning with doing an assessment and really understanding where your organization is right now and where it needs to get to really become durable and build a stack that will last. Sean, thank you so much. This has been tremendous. I have pages of notes. Really appreciate your time today.
All right. Thank you for having me, Michael, and for InfoTrust for putting on the summit. I hope everyone enjoys the day. It looks like a great agenda for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you, Michael. That was awesome. Aside from the great content that we heard, I now have some new phrases I can start using, like short-termism, fabulous failure, the blinker is on. I think Sean said something about performance is not at the odds of privacy. Hopefully I got that right. I'm going to make a t-shirt out of that one. So reminder to please, again, fill out the form in the chat box so we know you're here. We're going to take a 10-minute break. And if you are a truth seeker, we'll see you back here at 11:55 and looking forward to continuing the session.